expenses that the small businesses have had to incur in 2023 have killed all profitability to small business.
You're stressed out, you get tired. What are you supposed to get? You're always thinking, instead of thinking about the business, you're thinking how I'm supposed to come up with this money.
That ripple effect, the cascading effect of this is significantly more than just that one business.
I'm not jumping on any government bashing bandwagon. That said, it would be, if the government can find a way to extend it, it would be great for us.
A lot of anxiety tonight, as you heard there, from small business owners who took emergency government loans during pandemic lockdowns, a big chunk of which is forgivable if you pay them back by tomorrow. After that, those loans start accruing interest on their unpaid balances. Small businesses and their representative groups have called for another extension. The feds have so far issued 2, but the Prime Minister responded a bit earlier today to those calls by doubling down on the deadline.
We understand that things, even as the economy has bounced back from COVID, continue to be challenging, which is why we extended twice the repayment deadline for the CEBA loans. But we are now far enough from the pandemic that we do have to wrap up pandemic programs. If they can't quite make it by the 18th, there are plenty of financial institutions who are there to give low-cost loans to be able to benefit those businesses as they continue to repay it over the coming years.
For more on all of this, I'm joined now live by Richie Valdez. She's the Minister of Small Business. Hi, Minister. It's good to meet you and good to have you on our program tonight.
Thanks for having me, Vashi.
I appreciate you making the time. Minister, why have the concerns like the ones we just heard expressed by small business owners failed to convince you to extend the deadline?
Since 2015, our government has been there for small businesses. And let's take a step back and take a look at the bigger picture here. What we announced is really a range of flexibilities. It's not just 18 days. The point of CEBA was to really help keep businesses afloat during the pandemic and allow them to better recovery. But as we move away from the pandemic, as you heard the Prime Minister say, we announced a range of repayment options so that small businesses can choose from what works best for them.
I think I take your point that there are sort of a range of options available to those small businesses, but the option that they're foremost asking your government for is to be able to take a little longer to pay back the loan and enjoy the portion of which would have been forgiven until tomorrow. Because they say, though we are a little while out from the pandemic, the recovery has not been even for all parts of the economy. Again, why has that argument failed to convince you?
I've been there. I was a small business entrepreneur myself during the pandemic. The first option that's on the table for small businesses that the majority of small businesses have done is to repay the CEBA loan by tomorrow to benefit again from that forgiveness that comes with that. But we announced flexibility on refinancing, so small businesses have time to work with their financial institutions to refinance and repay while still benefiting from the forgivable portion of the loan. So as long as they apply by tomorrow and refinance by March the 28th, they can still access that forgivable portion. And then the additional announcement we made was an entire year extension to the term loan repayment deadline, which means small businesses have a whole 3 years to repay if they're not able to by tomorrow.
So just to be clear, if a small business applies by tomorrow to get an extension, they'll get the forgivable portion of the loan forgiven? Because that's not being clear in your government's communication so far.
So if they're able to pay by tomorrow, January 18th, they can get up to the $20,000 of forgiveness. But if they're unable to pay the entirety, they can meet with their financial institution and seek refinancing. And as long as their application is in with their financial institution, they have until March 28th, because it takes time for the loan adjudication to take place. They can still access that forgivable portion of the loan. And then again,
they still
sorry, go ahead.
Right, go ahead. Pardon me. Yeah, no, that's okay.
And then again, if they're not able, if option 1 and option 2 are still not viable for a small business, again, we announced an additional entire year extension on the entirety of the term loan repayment. So they will have 3 years through to December 31st, 2026 to pay back the loan at a low interest rate of 5%.
Yeah, I was going to say, I understand it's not as high as the interest rate they might access through another kind of loan, but it still is not nothing, right? Which is what they would have been able to access if you had extended the deadline further beyond tomorrow. I know that the Parliamentary Budget Officer, for example, Minister, analyzed that extending that deadline would cost the federal government $900 million. But the groups that represent these small businesses say at least 250,000 of them are at risk of closing their doors in the face of no extension on this deadline from your government. That means there goes the taxes that they pay, the employment income for the people that they employ. Isn't that also a tangible economic impact? And why wasn't that further taken into consideration when making your decision?
As of January 15th, we estimate nearly 70% of CEBA recipients have repaid and benefited from partial loan forgiveness, but we won't know the final numbers until the actual deadline passes. But I can confirm that we estimate 70% of small businesses have been able to make the repayment.
So that still leaves 30%. Can you quantify for us, out of the $48 billion the government loaned those businesses, how much of it is still owing?
Again, like if the approximately $49 billion, you take 70% of that, that's how much small businesses have been able to repay back. And I just want to add something which I feel is really important is we understand that small businesses continue to struggle, but we need to ensure that we balance our support for small businesses with fiscal responsibility. CEBA, again, was meant to keep small businesses afloat during the pandemic. But I believe the approach we have taken is a good balance between still supporting small businesses and then, of course, fiscal responsibility.
Let me ask you a bit more about the concept of fiscal responsibility in this context, because we have heard from a number of small business owners who don't necessarily feel like your government's sympathies or empathy is with them. And they, for example, highlight what they perceive to be an incongruent response from your government to those big corporations that took out assistance, emergency assistance for the wage subsidy versus the small business loan. And I'll quantify what I mean by that or be more specific. The Auditor General came to the conclusion that there was more than $15 billion in those wage subsidies that were cause for concern. The head of the CRA at the time testified to the effect that it wasn't really worth going after that money, that they didn't see the worth in that. Your government has not recouped all the money that is potentially flagged through that wage program, which largely benefited bigger corporations. And yet you're very ardent about this deadline for small businesses. Can you understand how they would feel like your sympathies are more largely with corporations versus small business?
Yes, I totally recognize that. Again, I've been there too as a small business entrepreneur. But I just want to be 100% clear here. We provided over $100 billion in pandemic supports to small businesses, and we did that right away as soon as small businesses needed it. CEBA alone was $49 billion. And I understand that small businesses have or are experiencing hardships today and continue to do so. The changes we provided continue to be a range of flexibilities so small businesses can choose what's best for them and their finances during this difficult time, whether that's repaying tomorrow, choosing to refinance with the additional extension till March 28, or repaying the entire term loan by December 31st, 2026.
Minister, I'm certainly not trying to diminish the size of the loans. You know, $49 billion is not a small line item, and I understand that. Neither is $15.5 billion. Neither is, for example, the amount of money that could be leveraged from grocery store chains, another set of big corporations whom your government threatened to level a tax against, an excess profit tax against, if they didn't comply with stabilizing food prices, which has not happened, which is borne out by inflation data yesterday. You won't levy a tax to raise revenue on those big corporations. But again, you won't accommodate a deadline extension for small businesses. Is it understandable to you that small businesses would feel tonight that you're trying to set that example or trying to achieve that goal of fiscal responsibility on their backs versus big corporations?
We've continued to be there for small businesses. We've given them, this is, again, 2 extensions for the CEBA loan, flexible options that we've provided. But this is in addition to many of the other programs and initiatives that we have provided for small businesses. For example, we secured agreements with both Visa and MasterCard to lower interchange fees for small businesses. That's a reduction of up to 27%, which takes place this fall. We've also lowered taxes for small businesses from 11% to 9%. And there's many initiatives that we have implemented, from the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, Black Entrepreneurship Program, and many other programs we put in place to continue to support small business across the country.
And certainly, Minister, I'm not trying to say that your government has done nothing. In no way is that the case. But you haven't directly answered why, for example, if you're so concerned about fiscal responsibility, you haven't followed through on the threat to levy an excess profit tax on grocery store chains, which have not complied with your government's demand that they stabilize prices.
We recognize that it is a very difficult time right now for small businesses. Again, we've provided them with many different options for small businesses during this time. Again, if they can pay back by tomorrow, they can seek up to $20,000 of forgiveness. We have additional we've extended the refinancing deadline so that they can seek refinancing from their financial institutions through to March 28. And again, if that's still not an option for small businesses, they have the entirety of 3 years to pay back the CEBA loan.
But with interest.
Correct, 5%.
Yeah, and just to be fair, it's not like they have an extra 3 years to do what they had the last few years to do. They have to do that with interest.
Correct.
And just finally, I'll just circle back again. What is your message tonight to those small businesses who feel as though your government has taken a different approach to them, notwithstanding the itemized list of things that you said that your government has done, versus the approach you're taking to corporations, and in particular, grocery store chains whom you've threatened to do something more and not made good on that threat?
Again, we continue to negotiate with the grocery chains. We've called them to Ottawa to ensure that we can continue to advocate for lower prices as it pertains to groceries. But in this particular case for CEBA loans, the point of these CEBA loans and subsidies which we provided was to really be there for small businesses, keep their businesses afloat during the pandemic. We are now past that time. And as we move away from the pandemic, we have provided them, again, as I've outlined today, several options on the table to help small businesses with being able to repay back the CEBA loan.
Okay, Minister, I'm out of time. I do appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.